Aha! Hi guys, today we are going to paint Mystique as she is stepping out of the shadows. For the full-length painting guide that includes the whole mini, check the video on Patreon. Okay, it's time for the dress. To paint something white, I like to start with a neutral color. You could leave some areas almost black with thin layers, but this will be a little bit faster recipe, so I'm not bothered by leaving some of the shadows black and go over them with thin layers. I also paint the clothes and highlight the gun that she is holding in his hand with some straight lines following the polygon shapes. I start sketching the main planes of light with base layer consistency. So light is coming more from the left, so to communicate that throughout my highlights, I need to have less volume on the right side. If we look at the character from the front, I'm painting the bigger volumes over the dress, but I also leave some shadow areas. These parts are the right side of the torso and legs. The breasts can feel a little bit tricky since the chest area is quite flat, but the side of the breast and the lower half of them feels more round. So with this value, we don't really need to make a separation on the top of the chest between the breasts and the chest itself, since it's a flat angled shape. But on the side, we need some curved shapes. Papa Laborts remembered when he had to draw naked ladies in the graduate year of school. If you're thinking about going to art school because you can draw or paint nice naked ladies, I have to tell you, and it's only my experience, of course, but 90% of the time you are going to have a model that is in her late 60s or 70s sometimes, so it's not as much fun as one would think. Me and my classmates were quite young, and we even asked our teacher if we could have any younger models. Not because we are perverts, but a younger body is much more different shape-wise than an older one. And she started laughing and replied that, these models get like €8 an hour. And this was like back in 2009. Maybe they earned less, I don't know. And it didn't count as a good hourly rate even back then. So she went like, do you think a good-looking young girl is going to sit here for that kind of money when she can make a lot more if she's naked elsewhere? So we realized that we're never going to draw nice young girls, but it's kind of funny because when you have to draw someone naked and you're like 17 or 18 years old, you feel a little bit strange at first, but after a while your mindset changes and you don't really see the person, you just see different shapes and how they connect to each other. Anyway, we had some very funny old ladies and guys we drew in school. The guys especially, they usually fall asleep fast, so we always have to wake them up to paint their eyes or draw their eyes and reset their posture. Okay, back to painting. I add a little bit more gray-white to the mixture and continue the highlight process using base layer consistency. On the back, I cover the folds around the waist, but I don't really highlight the back since the hair is casting a shadow over that part, or at least I paint it like it does. I want to have a very clear scratch over all the shapes. This is a time-consuming part, but this is going to be a foundation for all the upcoming steps, so the more solid the foundation, the better results we will have later. Obviously, you can fix everything later, but it feels nicer if you don't have to go back like 6 times to add more volume to some areas of the mini. Use layering if you are familiar with the technique, just adding more and more layers and reducing the size of them each time, creating a simple transition with thin layer consistency. Okay, I like to introduce some shadow tones over the mini, but to do that efficiently, I need some paint on the base. Since the character has mostly cold colors, I use this brown red as a base layer for the rocky base. I cover the whole surface with 2 layers and wait for it to dry. Now we are going to introduce some shadow tones over the mini and use some kantor blue with the airbrush. I add 6 drops of thinner to 1 brush full of paint. Mix the paint and the thinner in the airbrush cap and pinch on the needle and let the airflow mix it more. It's very important to apply this over the mini from one side. So I like to paint this as light is coming from the left, so I have to shade down the mini on the right side, okay? I use short bursts with the airbrush and I aim it from below on the dress, and I hold it a little bit above when I shading the rocks. This blue will add a lot more depth to the shadows all over the miniature. If I check it from the front, this blue should have catched one side of the rocks, creating a nice transition to the shadow areas. Next, I paint the transition effect as Mystique is starting to change into X23. So on the ID card, it looks like some sort of lightning bolts over his hand. So I paint them with a mix of kantor blue and temper guard blue with a base layer consistency. It's the same mixture that we used for the skin. After that, I cover some areas of this lighting with a mix of baharroth blue and ice yellow. I apply these thin layers inside the recent blue layer to create these lightning-like effects. Okay, time to apply the maximum value highlights over the dress and some other details. At first, I use thin layers to sketch out the shapes of my highlights inside my most recent layers. This off-white is going to create the white look for the dress. It's kind of tricky with white, in my opinion. It's a bit harder to paint something white than black, since these off-white paints are covered quite poorly. It's the same when we paint yellow, basically. So we need to build up the opacity with multiple layers to create a smooth white, but the problem is off-white doesn't really like to be thinned down, and sometimes you get these pigment chunks in the paint. In most cases, it helps if you dilute the paint with some thinner or medium, but I usually forget to use them. So I just hope for the best with water. I smooth out some of the blends with the airbrush. I add 1 drop of paint to 6 drops of thinner, and my compressor is around 1.5 bar. I hold the airbrush very close to the mini and I apply very small bursts of paint. If your paint is webbing, reduce the air pressure or add more paint. If the paint comes out in a dusty way that you can see some of the particles, add more thinner or increase the air pressure. Try it out for yourself, because different needle sizes and compressors can lead to different results, okay? During this process, you might have to repaint some hair locks over the chest, but I don't think that's a very big deal, and if you're precise enough with the airbrush, you won't have any white gray over the skin. After the airbrushing, I went back with some thin layers to finish the claws and the lightning bolts over the arm. On the claws, I used some thin layers to add some shine to them and edge highlighted all over the blades with a little bit thicker consistency. On the lightning bolts, I just reduced my highlights inside the most recent layer we previously painted to create a more intensive lightning effect. Now, only the little skulls left on the mini to be painted. I cover all of them with red leather, leaving the eye sockets black. I highlight them with yellow ochre. On the sphere shape of the skulls, I cover their left side more, so they will line up with the rest of the highlights over the mini. Some of those skulls are not super well detailed, but the ones on the front seemed decent enough, so don't get too frustrated about painting them. After that, I paint a small dot over the left side of the skull, so they look shiny and make the non-metallic effect more believable. It's time to finish the base. I paint the left side of each rock individually and leave some recessed shadows between them for more detail. There are some flat parts over the base. To make those more interesting, I also paint some rocks over them so they blend in more with the rest of the environment. On the bigger rocks, I sketch out some polygons that follows the majority of their angles and form to add more detail. It's very important that I only cover one side of these rocks so I won't get rid of my shadow areas. Lastly, I reduce my highlight areas with yellow ochre. This color will add more saturation and warmth to the rocks, so the character with cold corals will stand out more. I applied this color over the left side, so it can nicely line up with the rest of the highlights and reinforces the fact that light is coming from the left. And there you go guys, Mystique is done and ready for the table. Thanks for all my lovely patrons who support these kind of videos. If you're interested in some exclusive content or PDF guides of heroes and villains that won't receive a video guide, consider joining my Patreon page. And a special shoutout goes to Cold-Blooded Dom, Trying to Paint Minis, Jonathan Mosner, Glitchy McCrash, Penoman45 and Michael Kerr. I hope your day will be as smooth as a granny's butt cheek.